Okay, thank you all for joining us. Hope you're doing well and having a nice day so far. It's Tuesday. We're going to look at the Rashi from the third Aliyah in our, again, very exciting Parsha. We read about the last three of the Makos in this week's Parsha. The second of that second set, which is Makas Choshech, and then we have Makas Bechoros, etc. One of the interesting pieces of the Parsha is just before the climax, really, of the story, just before the actual Yetzias Mitzrayim instructions are given and all of the parameters of what happens during Makas Bechoros and how the Jewish people will be saved and the Korban Pesach and everything else that comes after the fourth Aliyah. Right at the end of our Aliyah today, there's one little preamble to the real piece of the Geula, to the real climax of the Geula, and that is this pasuk, Daber na ba'aznei ha'am, Vayishalu ish me'es re'ehu v'isha me'es re'usa klei chesef u'chlei zahav. Hashem says to Moshe, please speak to the people and let every person ask from their neighbor and every woman ask from her neighbor for vessels of silver and vessels of gold. Now, of course, we know that this is a very important piece of the Exodus story, piece of Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's something that's mentioned 4 times in the Torah. It's something promised to Avram Avinu already in the Bris Bein HaBesarim, already in Parshas Lech Lecha. And then it's something mentioned to Moshe Rabbeinu right at the beginning of his establishment as the leader of the Jewish people in Parshas Shmos. Now it's mentioned here again in the instructions to Moshe to give to the Jewish people in the preamble to that great night of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And then we're going to read about it again after, when it actually occurs in Yetzias Mitzrayim, in the story, not here in the narrative portion, in the instructive portion, but in the portion of the story in which it actually occurs and takes place, where the Jewish people take the wealth of Egypt along with them out into the Midbar. And there are so many questions surrounding this whole chapter of Yetzias Mitzrayim, this whole chapter and piece of the story. We've talked about it in different drashas and shurim over the course of the years, questions about what they did with all this wealth, questions about why this wealth was so important for them to take out of Egypt, and so on and so forth. But I want to just show you a very simple Rashi, which takes note of one extra word or one odd word in the pasuk. When Hashem says to Moshe, do X, Y, and Z, normally he says, Moshe, tell the Jewish people to do X. Except over here it says, Daber na be'oznei ha'am. Please, na is like the language of please. Please speak in the ears of the nation, speak to the nation, and tell them to go ask their neighbors for chlei chesef and chlei zahav before they leave Egypt. This word na is what Rashi picks up on. Daber na, ein na el lashon bakasha. Na is the language of a request. It's almost like saying please. And even if it's not the polite please, it's certainly indicative of a request and not a command. It's a bakasha and not a tzivui, which is very odd. Normally, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us a tzivui. He tells Moshe to give the Jewish people a tzivui, a command, an authoritative, directive, prescriptive action. And over here, it's a request. Daber na, please speak to them. And it would be good. It doesn't even say tell them to Yishalu Yishmei Israel. It just goes right into it. Daber na be'azneam ve'yishalu, and hopefully they will ask their neighbors. It doesn't even say to tell them to do this in a mildly prescriptive fashion or in a mildly request kind of fashion. It's just daber na, please. B'lashon bakasha. Bevakasha mimcha. Please, I'm asking of you. Kisiram al kach. I'm asking you, Moshe, please, to warn them about this, to remind them about this. So why did Hashem want to ask them to do this? Shelo yomar osad tzadik avihem, va'avadum v'inu osam kiyem bahem, v'achrechen yitzu b'chush gadol lo kiyem bahem. So that the great, ancestor of theirs, their tzaddik of a great-great-grandfather, Avram Avinu, would not say that, oh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you cheated me. You told me this whole story of what's going to happen to my descendants. You told me they're going to go be slaves. You told me that they're going to be tortured in Egypt. And you told me they're going to go out with great wealth, as if it's some kind of consolation prize. And so you fulfilled the slavery part, but you didn't fulfill the wealth part. So in order to make sure that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not a liar, in order to make sure that HaKadosh Baruch Hu fulfills his promise to Avram Avinu, way back in Parshas Lech Lecha, that his children would not only be slaves, but they'll also go out b'rechush gadol, that they're going to go out with great wealth. So please, Moshe, remind them of this task. Now, Rashi explains the na piece. He explains why this was so important. But there's something else that strikes me about this Rashi, which I think is really, really interesting, and it ties back to the language of na, the request, as opposed to the tzivui, to the command. And that is, this is one piece of the whole Yetzias Mitzrayim story, which fascinatingly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't do on his own. Every other piece of the story, God wanted to wipe out the Egyptians. He could have wiped them out with no help from us or from Moshe or from the staff, right? That's all theatrics. Moshe, go and put your staff here, and Aaron, go put your staff there, and do this. And okay, there's a human component to those things, but that's not necessary. Kadosh Baruch Hu could have come in and put frogs all over Egypt and put dam all over Egypt. He didn't need any human involvement. But all of a sudden, in this piece, Hashem needs us. Right? Hashem can't go and take the wealth for us. That's something that we need to do. If we are going to walk out with the wealth of Egypt, Hashem could punish Egypt. Hashem could set all the forces of nature against Egypt. Hashem could kind of go inside the mind or the body or the heart of any Egyptian and cause them to self-destruct, whatever he would want to do, in some miraculous fashion. But Hashem can't take our hand, put it in the house of the Egyptians, and pull out the wealth of Egypt. This is the one thing, kiviyachol, that Hashem cannot do. Hashem needs us. Hashem requires our partnership on this matter to fulfill this element of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And because of that, instead of giving us a command, he says to Moshe, Daber na, please, I'm asking you to ask Bnei Israel to please do this for me. And it's a beautiful thing, because what it really does, aside from all the other elements of the taking of the wealth of Egypt, which I said is its own study and its own idea, what it says here is Hashem is inviting us to be his partners in Yetzias Mitzrayim in an otherwise very top-down, very God-driven experience, except for perhaps the Korban Pesach, perhaps the blood on the doorpost, those things which are about to come later in our Parsha. It's a very God-centered, God-driven experience, totally miraculous, above all bounds of nature. And in this very human, kind of very humble moment, Hashem says, please, please, please come be my partners. And in that way, we help, not only to bring about the redemption, but to help God do good on his promise to our great-great-great-grandfather, Avraham Avinu. And I don't know what that means. And it's almost heretical to say God needs us and God invites us, but in some fashion, I found that to be a very strengthening thought and a very inspiring thought, and something that I know I wanted to think about further, and then inviting you to think about it further as well. Have a great day, everyone.